German soldiers were trained to count shots. Bolt-action rifles forced rhythm into battle. Fire, cycle, fire again. But when Americans appeared with the M1 Garand, that rhythm collapsed. The shots came too fast, too steady, too confident. It felt less like facing infantry and more like walking into a wall that never paused. German units often hesitated, waiting for a reload that never came. And that hesitation cost lives. The reason the M1 Garand earned such resentment wasn't its power or its range. It was the way it erased the brief moments of silence soldiers depended on to survive. And once those moments were gone, fear filled the gap. By the early 20th century, infantry warfare was changing faster than most armies were willing to admit. Bolt-action rifles had defined combat for decades, but World War I exposed their limits. Battles were no longer won by careful marksmanship alone. They were defeated by firepower, suppression, and momentum. Soldiers needed to fire quickly without breaking their position to reload, and that reality pushed the U.S. Army to search for something radically different, a reliable semi-automatic service rifle. That challenge landed in the hands of John Cantius Garand. Born in Quebec in 1888 and raised in the United States, Garand had no formal engineering degree, but he possessed something just as valuable: practical mechanical skill. From working in textile mills to tool-making shops, he learned forging, welding, and precision machining firsthand. His fascination with firearms grew alongside his talent for invention, eventually leading him to work on weapons design for the U.S. government. At Springfield Armory, Garand was tasked with replacing the aging M1903 bolt-action rifle. The requirements were strict. The new rifle had to be semi-automatic, durable, accurate, and capable of firing the standard .30-06 Springfield cartridge. Most importantly, it had to function reliably in mud, dust, cold, and combat stress. Many designs were tested and discarded, including Garand's own early prototypes, which suffered from weak bolts and mechanical failures. Garand ultimately solved the problem with a gas-operated system. By redirecting a small amount of gas from each fired round, the rifle could automatically eject the spent casing and chamber the next cartridge. He paired this with an 8-round en-bloc clip, which fed smoothly into the gun and was ejected once empty. This design balanced simplicity, reliability, and speed, precisely what the Army needed. After years of trials and refinement, the rifle was officially standardized as the M1 in 1936. Production began slowly, but as global tensions rose, Springfield Armory dramatically expanded output. By World War II, millions of M1 Garands were being produced, turning Garand's once controversial idea into the standard weapon of the American infantry and permanently changing how wars were fought. The M1 Garand was built to do one thing exceptionally well: keep pressure on the enemy without pause. Its most important feature was its semi-automatic, gas-operated system, which allowed the rifle to reload itself after every shot. When a bullet was fired, gas from the explosion was redirected through a small port near the muzzle. That gas pushed a piston connected to the bolt, ejecting the empty casing and chambering the next round automatically. For American soldiers, this meant they could fire again immediately without touching the bolt. For German soldiers armed mainly with bolt-action Kar 98K rifles, this was a serious problem. Every shot they fired required a manual motion that broke aim and slowed their response. In a firefight, that difference quickly became overwhelming. The Garand's 8-round en-bloc clip added to this pressure. Instead of loading rounds one at a time, soldiers inserted a full clip and were instantly ready to fire. Reloading was fast, simple, and consistent, even under stress. German troops noticed that American rifle fire rarely paused for long, making it difficult to move or counterattack. The rifle's proving power also mattered. Chambered in .30-06 Springfield, The M1 delivered strong stopping power while remaining accurate at medium and long ranges. At around 9.5 pounds, its weight helped absorb recoil, allowing soldiers to fire repeatedly without losing control. This made sustained fire more accurate and easier to manage. Reliability sealed its reputation. The Garand was designed to function in mud, cold, rain, and dust, which were the exact conditions found in European combat zones. It rarely jammed and required minimal maintenance in the field. German soldiers weren't just facing faster fire. They were facing a rifle that almost always worked when needed. All of this created a battlefield reality where Americans could apply constant pressure. There were fewer pauses, fewer openings, and fewer chances for German units to regain control. The Garand didn't just shoot faster, it took away time. And in combat, time is survival. When the United States entered World War II, it did so with a weapon no other major army had fully embraced: a standard-issue semi-automatic rifle. By the end of 1941, American infantry units were already fully equipped with the M1 Garand, a feat made possible by an enormous industrial effort that pushed production to nearly 600 rifles per day by early 1941. As the war expanded, output only increased. By 1945, more than 5.4 million M1 Garands had been produced, arming every branch of the U.S. military and placing unprecedented firepower into the hands of ordinary soldiers. On the battlefield, the difference was immediate. While American troops fired 8 rounds as fast as they could pull the trigger, most of their opponents were still working bolt-action rifles. German soldiers carried the Carabiner 98K, Italian troops the Carcano, and Japanese infantry the Arisaka, all accurate weapons, but slow by comparison. In close combat, that delay mattered. The M1 allowed American soldiers to stay aggressive, keep enemies pinned, and advance while firing. Encounters that once depended on carefully timed shots now turned into overwhelming bursts of sustained rifle fire. This advantage reshaped infantry combat. Enemy units often believed they were facing far larger forces than they actually were, simply because American fire never seemed to let up. The psychological effect was as powerful as the physical one. General George S. Patton famously recognized this shift, calling the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. It wasn't just a compliment, it was an acknowledgement that the rifle had changed how wars were fought at the individual level. The M1's influence extended beyond the U.S. Army. Its success forced both Allied and Axis powers to rethink their small arms doctrine. Semi-automatic and fully automatic weapons were issued in greater numbers, and new designs were rushed into development. Even nations that chose not to adopt the Garand took careful note of what it accomplished in American hands. The rifle served everywhere American forces fought, from the beaches of Normandy to the forests of Europe and the islands of the Pacific. It became a symbol of American industrial strength and battlefield adaptability. And even after World War II ended, the M1 refused to fade away. Rebuilt, redistributed, and supplied to allies across the world, it remained in frontline service for decades. In World War II, the M1 Garand wasn't just a rifle, it was an American way of showing the world that modern warfare had entered a new era, and that the individual soldier now carried firepower once reserved for entire squads. German soldiers didn't hate the M1 Garand because it looked impressive or sounded powerful. They hated it because it ruined the way they were trained to fight. For years, German infantry tactics were built around control and timing. Soldiers were taught to fire carefully, move with purpose, and use short pauses in combat to reposition or attack. Bolt-action rifles naturally created those pauses. The M1 Garand erased them. When German troops fought American units, they often couldn't tell how many enemies they were facing. The constant rifle fire made small American groups feel much larger. German soldiers waited for the usual signs: a reload, a moment of silence, but those moments rarely came. Americans just kept shooting. That hesitation was dangerous. It slowed reactions, broke confidence, and in many cases, cost lives. This wasn't only about how fast the Garand could fire. It changed who controlled the fight. German squads depended heavily on their machine guns to dominate an area. Riflemen supported the machine gun, not the other way around. Against Americans, this system stopped working the same way. Every U.S. rifleman could keep enemies pinned down while moving forward. German infantry suddenly found themselves on the defensive, even when they believed they had equal or better positions. German battlefield reports from Western Europe show this clearly. Units complained that American soldiers were difficult to suppress. Even when German machine guns were firing, American rifle fire often continued without slowing. This forced German squads to rely on their machine guns earlier and more often, making those weapons easier for Americans to spot and target with mortars or artillery. The mental pressure was just as important as the physical danger. German veterans later described fighting Americans as exhausting. It felt like being under constant fire, with no safe moment to breathe or move. Many of these soldiers had already fought on the Eastern Front, where combat was brutal but familiar. Fighting Americans felt different. There were no obvious weak points. Every soldier could shoot quickly and accurately. That fear pushed some German troops to extreme measures. There are confirmed cases of Germans picking up M1 Garands from fallen American soldiers, even though the ammunition and clips were hard to find. This wasn't about liking the rifle. It was about staying alive. When enemy weapons seem more useful than your own, morale takes a hit. German leadership recognized the problem. Efforts to introduce semi-automatic rifles were rushed, but most came too late and in small numbers to make a real difference. By the time solutions appeared, the damage was already done. In the end, Germans hated the M1 Garand because it took away something they depended on: predictability. It made combat faster, louder, and harder to control. The rifle didn't just fire bullets, it removed the pauses that soldiers relied on to survive. The impact of the M1 Garand didn't end when World War II did. Its success essentially changed how armies around the world thought about infantry weapons. For the first time, a major power had proven that a standard-issue semi-automatic rifle could be reliable, mass-produced, and effective in real combat. During World War II alone, over 5.4 million M1 Garands were produced. This scale mattered. It showed that modern firepower wasn't just about advanced design. It was about the ability to equip millions of soldiers with it. German forces understood this lesson the hard way, as their own semi-automatic rifles arrived too late and in too few numbers to make a real difference. The Garand directly influenced future American rifles. The M14 was essentially an evolution of the M1, keeping the same basic operating system while adding a detachable magazine and selective fire. Later, the M16 carried forward the idea that infantry rifles should allow fast follow-up shots, reduced effort, and sustained fire. All principles first proven by the Garand. Germany's response also speaks volumes. Late war developments like the STG-44 reflected a desperate attempt to close the firepower gap. While revolutionary in its own way, it was a reaction to the new reality the Garand helped create. Infantry combat was becoming faster, more aggressive, and more focused on individual firepower. Beyond the battlefield, the M1 Garand became a symbol. Its distinctive clip ejection sound, solid build, and wartime reputation cemented its place in history. It remained in service for decades and continued to be used in training, competition, and ceremonial roles. For German soldiers, the M1 Garand represented more than a weapon. It represented industrial strength, modern thinking, and a future of warfare they were forced to confront too soon. That is why it wasn't just feared, it was deeply hated. War isn't just fought with soldiers, it's fought with ideas, industry, and design. The M1 Garand proved that a single weapon, built the right way and produced at scale, could change how battles were won and how enemies felt fighting them. For German soldiers, it wasn't just another rifle. It was pressure they couldn't escape. If you enjoyed this in-depth look into the weapons that made history, there are many more stories like this waiting to be told. Hit subscribe, stay with the channel, and let's keep uncovering the moments that changed warfare forever.